Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
Today, we're going to continue to draw water out of the well. Well, more specifically, we're going to draw wisdom from India's ancient step wells. We introduced this topic to you last time. They're basically these ancient wells in India that extend down into the earth, and they're very ornate. They've got carvings and statues and staircases and stuff like that. And, of course, they're probably very popular tourist attractions, and if you go there, of course, you'll probably have to pay a small fee to enter the facility, but it will be well worth your time to see how ancient people got water in order to drink or to bathe with or to irrigate their crops.
Yeah, most especially they were probably using the water for drinking water. There is a lot of water in India, but a lot of those lakes I've seen on documentary programs look quite dirty. People go and they take their animals there, of course, you know, the cow, which is seen as sacred. People bathe in them. There's soap that's used in that water. So you definitely wouldn't want to drink the water in the lake. So these step wells gave them water to drink, but also we learned they were places where the community would gather together and just socialize. And also, if you couldn't stand the heat, and India is so hot. It's like Taiwan weather in the summer every day. But they would go to these step wells as a retreat on very hot days because, of course, at the bottom of the well, it would be much cooler than at the top or ground level. So there were several different ways in which these step wells became an essential part of ancient Indian life, and now they're really cool just to go see. Some of these are quite old. We learned that some are 4,000 years old, which is amazing that they are still in existence. I think that tells us they were built well to begin with. We're going to start today's lesson, guys, by reading through today's article, and then we'll be back.
Many step wells in India hold their own legends. One of the most tragic is the tale of Adilaj stepwell in Gujarat. A Muslim conqueror fell in love with the widow of the Hindu king he'd killed. Before she would marry him, the woman insisted he finish building the stepwell her late husband had started. Upon its completion, she jumped in and drowned herself. Though the legend has faded with time, Adilaj remains a splendid example of stepwell design. Sadly, many stepwells fell into disuse as modern water systems were devised. They especially suffered under British rule, as the British considered them unhygienic and sealed many away. Today, numerous communities aren't even aware of nearby stepwells or don't consider them significant. Some have been filled in with mud, others left to stagnate, and still others turned into garbage dumps. Now, though, the story of stepwells is coming full circle. India struggles with clean water shortages, with 200,000 Indians dying every year from inadequate water access. Governments in places like Rajasthan, one of the world's most water-scarce regions, are acknowledging stepwells as viable solutions. Stepwell restoration has the potential to solve water shortages and make many smaller communities more self-sufficient. In service of these objectives, dozens of stepwells have been restored to use, with more still to come. Residents in villages with restored stepwells have been thrilled with the outcome. A cattle farmer in Rajasthan no longer has to walk hours in search of water for his cows. Another village's head teacher says the local stepwell has become the grandeur of our village. Just as in ancient times, these imaginative works of architecture are fostering opportunities for healthy living and community independence.
Notice from the title, we're supposed to be drawing wisdom from India's ancient stepwells. We're trying to learn some things through these ancient stepwells. We're going to be focused more on some of the great benefits of these stepwells. And I was sad to learn when I read this lesson that when the British came in, they kind of closed up or closed off some of them. We'll talk about that in a minute. So many of these stepwells in India hold their own legends. What's a legend? It's a traditional story that is typically passed down through time and people and cultures. It's regarded as historical, but oftentimes it's not been authenticated or proven to be true. There's sometimes no evidence to support it, but these legends can still continue to exist, which we love, of course. Like the legend of King Arthur and Camelot. Those are popular in the States. We grew up with those. We love those legends. So one of the most tragic is the tale of the Adalaj stepwell in Gujarat. So it's tragic, meaning, someone either died or someone was really hurt badly. Typically, if you use tragic, someone has passed away or has been killed. So let's see why this was tragic. It's a tale of the Adalaj stepwell in Gujarat. As I said, there was a Muslim conqueror who fell in love with a widow of the Hindu king he'd killed. So he was a conqueror, meaning he came from another area of the world, and he, through battle and killing and armies, he was able to conquer the people or the area that he went into. This wasn't his country. So he was a Muslim. He probably came from the Middle East. He fell in love with the widow of the Hindu king he just killed. She was probably beautiful, and he saw her and thought, oh, this is the one I want. Well, you can imagine how this woman felt about him. This man, the conqueror, had just killed her husband that she probably loved, and she was now a widow. I'm sure she wasn't very excited about this Muslim conqueror professing his undying love for her. She probably thought, you just caused a tragedy in my life. Get away. So what happened here, Tom?
Well, as you know, of course, in India, most people are Hindus, but there is a large Muslim population. So in this particular case, the Muslim conqueror killed a Hindu king, I guess because they were enemies. But after killing the king, he fell in love with the widow of the king. Of course, once your husband dies, you become a widow. And before she would marry him, the woman insisted he finish building the stepwell her late husband had started. So I'm pretty angry that you killed my husband, and it's kind of weird that you want to marry me, but I'll marry you if you promise to finish building the stepwell that my husband started. He didn't have time to finish it because you came and killed him, so you have to finish it, and then I will marry you.
It's great, isn't it? So Tom just kind of painted the story for us. It's kind of ridiculous that this Muslim guy fell for her story, like, oh, as soon as you finish building the stepwell, I will be your wife. That's all it takes. Meanwhile, she's got a sneaky, devious plan up her sleeve. She wants him to finish the stepwell so that then she can jump in and drown herself and not ever have to be this dude's wife. So though the legend has faded with time, to fade just becomes, it's less bright. We often use fade when we're talking about a color gradually growing less and less bright or vivid and then finally disappearing. Fade, scars fade. Here, it says the legend has faded with time, or maybe this legend isn't told so much these days, but Adalaj remains a splendid example of stepwell design. We think it's because of the Hindu king who probably designed the stepwell to begin with. It was only the conqueror who finished the stepwell. If something's splendid, it's wonderful. Splendid is not a word I typically use when I'm speaking, but you will hear it. I think the Brits use it more than the Americans, but it just means magnificent, really impressive. It's splendid. So when you hear that, you know someone's happy with something. Maybe they've called you splendid, or maybe your boss has described the work that you just finished as splendid. That's a compliment.
Right, so if you do a good job, your boss may say, oh, splendid, you did a great job. And of course, here, entourage remains a splendid example of step-well design. And it's kind of nice here because I suppose the Muslim conqueror could have been very angry that she committed suicide. Well, if you're going to commit suicide, then I'm going to destroy this step-well. But he recognized that it was pretty cool and decided not to do that. Hence, we have the step-well nowadays that we can all check out and enjoy and take pictures of and stuff like that. Now, moving on to the next paragraph here, it says, sadly, many stepwells fell into disuse as modern water systems were devised. So here we've got the word disuse, which means something is just not being used. You could build something, but it is no longer used, and we often just say fell into disuse. I guess we almost always say it that way. I can't think of any other way to use the word disuse. Fell into disuse. It became not used anymore. It was no longer used.
Fell out of favor.
Exactly, that's similar. And indeed, this happened because modern water systems were devised. So they thought, we've got these modern pumps and pipes and stuff like that, so we don't really need to use those stepwells anymore. So we just kind of ignore it and just let it sit there. And so it falls into disuse and probably decays over time and falls apart and falls into ruin.
Right. They especially suffered, we're talking about the stepwells, under British rule. So there were quite a few decades where the British were controlling or ruling India. And of course, they considered all of their systems and ways of doing things much better than those that had been done in India for thousands of years. So they decided, hey, these stepwells look dirty. We're not using these. So they called them unhygienic, which is another word for dirty, not clean, maybe has too many germs there, and they sealed many away. So if you seal something up, you use something that's very strong that just closes something completely, like a container, right? You seal it up so that nothing comes in or out. So that's kind of a tragedy right there, that they sealed up a lot of these stepwells. Today, numerous communities aren't even aware of nearby stepwells. Remember, they're under the ground level, so if they can't see them, they don't even think about them. Why would they know they were there? And some don't consider them significant or important. Some have been filled in with mud. Oh, that makes me so sad.
Oh, no.
Others left to stagnate, and still others turned into garbage dumps. Now, that would be unhygienic for sure. If something's left to stagnate, it just means the water there, usually we're talking about water. If it's left to stagnate, it means there's no fresh water flowing in. And when that happens, that water turns dirty and you get lots of bugs and animals and germs in there. And you definitely don't want to be drinking or even getting into that water.
Right, and of course, mosquitoes can lay their eggs in the water, and you can have all sorts of nasty mosquitoes that carry diseases and stuff like that. So, yes, you want the water to be flowing in and out so it doesn't stagnate and cause problems. And then, of course, nowadays with packaging and cans and bottles, people think, what are we going to do with all this trash? Hey, there's a stepwell outside of town. Let's just throw all our trash there. And that's what these have turned into, and that's quite tragic as well. Hopefully they'll be restored pretty soon, and we'll continue talking about those efforts in just a couple of seconds. Let's take a break right now and listen to our Chinese teacher.
听众朋友大家好，我是安娜。我们昨天带大家到印度去认识一下阶梯井，很多这个阶梯井其实它都有自己的一些 legends， 就是有一些故事啊传说在背后。我们今天第一段就带大家看到其中一个蛮有名的故事，当然最悲惨的就是这个 Gujarat， 当时是一个 Muslim 的一个征服者，他爱上了他所杀死的印度教国王的遗孀。不过呢，在这位遗孀愿意跟他结婚之前，这个遗孀坚持一定要先把他已故丈夫开始建造的阶梯井，把它做一个完成建造的动作，然后才跟这个征服者结婚。可是完工之后呢，他就跳入井水当中就自杀了。当然这个故事是很壮烈啦，不过我们还是要回头来看一下，在这一段当中的第3句 出现了一个关系词的一个省略，先行词是 the Hindu king， 那么 he 到后面句尾可以左右括号。那当然我们知道先行词是这个国王嘛，那么关系词就是 who 或者是 that。 不过在这里呢，做一个省略的动作。为什么可以省略啊？因为括号里面他杀的后面少了受词，也就是关系词的 who 或者是 that 本身当杀的受词，如果关系词是受词，它就可以被省略掉。好，我们同样看到第一段第4句，坚持这个动词insisted， 因为它是一个建议式动词。建议式动词很特别，建议或者是坚持某件事，某个人应该怎么做，后面一定会有一个助动词的 should， 但是 should 又常常会省略掉。所以你有没有注意到在第一段第4句这个地方 insisted 这个遗孀坚持 he， 也就是这个 Muslim 的征服者 should do something， should 省略，看到 finish 完成一件事情，这里的 finish 是动词原形哦。好，那么接下来呢，就看到我们同样这一段第5句，一开始的这个介系词 upon 是指在某个动作的瞬间，也就是怎么的时候。那在这些传说之后呢，很可惜的是因为现代这个供水系统有一些新的设计，所以就不太用阶梯井，阶梯井就被闲置了。那么在英国的统治之下，阶梯井因为很多英国人觉得它不卫生，所以就封闭了很多个。不过现在的社区呢，因为被封闭的关系，有很多人都不知道附近居然有阶梯井然后也不太知道它有什么样的重要意义。所以有些是怎么封的呢？有一些是被泥土填满，有一些呢则就是放在那边，甚至是当成垃圾场了。不过第2段的第4句，我们看到一个列举的用法， some 逗点之后 others， 在逗点之后 and still others， 可以特别把它框起来哦。有些阶梯井如何如何，其他的如何如何，还有一些其他的如何如何。但是如果我们在列举这个所谓的 other 之前都没有看到定冠词 the 的话，它都没有被列举完毕。所以阶梯井的状况很多，目前在第4句我们只看到其中3种状况：1泥土填满，或2停滞不前，3变成垃圾场。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back, guys. We're talking about drawing wisdom from India's ancient stepwells. And in day 2, we started out by sharing a very popular legend about a Muslim conqueror who conquered an area of India. He killed the Hindu king that was ruler at the time and decided he thought his wife, the Hindu king's wife, was awfully pretty, and he fell in love with her. But before she would agree to marry him, the woman insisted that he finish building the stepwell her late husband had designed and started constructing. Well, as soon as it was done, the lady jumped in and drowned herself so she could avoid being married to the man who'd killed her husband. So the legend has faded with time, but it's still around and is in regards to Adalaj, which is a stepwell in Gujarat. So it remains a splendid example of stepwell design. So a lot of these stepwells have fallen into disuse, which is sad, meaning they're not used anymore because modern water systems have been devised since the time of these stepwells. Remember, some of them are quite old. When the Brits came over and took control of India, they decided they were dirty and unhygienic, so they sealed a lot of them away so people couldn't use the water. If it's sealed, nothing can come in or out. And today, there are a lot of communities that don't even know they have stepwells right nearby. They're unaware of them, or they don't think they're important enough to bother with them. Some, sadly, have been filled in with mud, dirt and water combined as mud. Others left to stagnate. Or you could say the water in them is stagnant, which is the adjective form. And still others sadly, this is the worst one, have been turned into garbage dumps.
Yeah, that happens sometimes. And of course, now the story of stepwells is coming full circle. If something comes full circle, it's gone through a cycle, but then eventually it returns to the starting point. They're right back where they started. And so they might actually be useful again. India struggles with clean water shortages, with 200,000 Indians dying each year from inadequate water access. Inadequate means it's insufficient. They don't have enough water. And of course, Indians will die as a result of that. Lots of people will die as a result of not having enough water, or that means the water that they do have is dirty and carries diseases. They get sick, they die. And governments in places like Rajasthan, one of the world's most water-scarce regions, are acknowledging stepwells as viable solutions. So if you're in Rajasthan, it's pretty arid there. It's a water-scarce region, which means it's an area that doesn't have a lot of water. Not like Taiwan here, because it rains all the time here and we get plenty of typhoons.
Oh, yeah, which is nice. We like our water. To acknowledge something just means you admit something is true or you accept something. They're acknowledging stepwells as viable solutions. Viable just means it's successful. It has a chance to work successfully. It's feasible. We'll often use it to talk about a plant or an animal, or even a fetus in a woman who is able to survive successfully or live successfully under certain conditions. So stepwell restoration has the potential to solve water shortages, which is great, and make many smaller communities more self-sufficient or able to take care of themselves. Restoration is the noun form of the verb to restore, which means to bring something back to its original situation. We restore buildings by redesigning them, restoring them, making them better than they were. Sometimes buildings fall into disuse, or they aren't treated or taken care of well, and so they look terrible. If you restore something, you put it back to its original condition.
Right. Where we have our office here, there were some nearby Japanese-era houses that were crumbling, and they've gone through some restoration recently, and they've done a good job there.
They look beautiful.
They look beautiful, but to me, they're just rebuilt. And this process, though, still is referred to as restoration. And back to India here, we're talking about stepwell restoration that has the potential to solve water shortages and make many smaller communities more self-sufficient. So maybe these stepwells have some uses for modern times. In service of these objectives, dozens of stepwells have been restored to use, with more still to come. So in service of these objectives, in order to reach these goals, lots of these stepwells have been restored. They've gone through restoration, and they are restored. They're back to their original condition, and they're being used for their original purpose, to store water for drinking, for bathing, and stuff like that, because, as we said, India suffers from water shortages.
Moving on to the final paragraph, it says residents in villages with some of these restored stepwells have been thrilled with the outcome. If you're thrilled, it means you're really happy, you're excited, you're pleased with something. They're really happy, though. The outcome is just the result of something or the consequences of something. Notice here you don't have to say with the outcomes. Outcome can be used in a non-count way. So can result. You can say they have been thrilled with the result. Or the results, you could use it non-count or countable too. A cattle farmer, here's an example in Rajasthan, no longer has to walk hours in search of water for his cows. So here he's able to get his hands on some water. Remember, Rajasthan is one of the most dry or water-scarce regions. So this particular cattle farmer must be really thrilled. Here's another village's head teacher. She says the local stepwell has become the grandeur of our village. Grandeur, I love how she uses that word. Grandeur just means just majestic, almost fit for a king or a queen. It's splendid, it's impressive. So she's saying that stepwell has become kind of the shining star of their own community, which is wonderful.
Right. Lots of countries in the world want to restore the grandeur of their early civilization and be strong like they were in the past. So here, of course, this teacher says the stairwell has become the grandeur of our village, the greatest thing our village has ever seen. Just as in ancient times, these imaginative works of architecture are fostering opportunities for healthy living and community independence.So here, of course, we're talking about just like in ancient times, just as things were done thousands of years ago, these works of architecture are giving opportunities for people to live healthy lives. And we're describing these works of architecture as being imaginative, which means they required a lot of imagination. Oh, what an imaginative painting you just did there. And of course, they're fostering opportunities. They're offering opportunities for people to enjoy healthy living, to have plenty of water, and they can also be independent of the larger water grid, I suppose, and not be victim to flooding and things like that. If there is a drought, they might have a water supply that will last them for several months to get through the hard times. Maybe we ought to consider doing something like that here in Taiwan because we do have droughts from time to time.Yeah,
we sure do. Well, we're out of time for now, but we're going to listen one more time to our Chinese teacher.
不过现在啊，阶梯井的故事兜了一圈又回到原来的模样啦。因为其实印度现在就是缺乏干净的水资源嘛，而且每年有20万名的印度人都死于供水不足。所以为了要解决这样子的问题，其实阶梯井似乎又死而复活嘞。大家会觉得阶梯井的修复可以解决这些水资源的问题。好，我们来看一下第三段。第三段在第2句的地方，逗点之后有一个 with。这里的 with 是介系词，它表达的是一种附带的状况。所以我们在第2句逗点之后 with 看到的是20万印度人，但是受到 with 介系词的影响，所以每年死亡的死就不能用动词咯，介系词之后面只能够用名词或动词 ing， 所以你可以特别把 with 画个箭头拉到 dying 这个地方。同样的这样的用法，我们在这一段第3段第5句的地方，最后面 with more still to come， 这里的 with 也表示附带状况。with 附带的是 more， 更多的什么呢？根据文意推测，指的是更多的阶梯井可以恢复使用。好，那么当然村庄的居民啊，对于这一些修复阶梯井的这个结果感到很兴奋，因为可能对于这些比如说养乳牛啦、养牛户啦，或者是一些灌溉用水啦，其实都有找到水资源了。还有呢，有一些村庄的学校也觉得阶梯井就是一些宏伟壮丽的景象，而且就像古代一样，其实这些建筑作品呢，其实正在为健康的生活跟社区培养一些机会。好，我们看一下第4段最后面这个地方，第1句中间出现了一个 with， 它跟我们刚才讲到第3段第5句这里的 with 一样，都是所谓的附带状况的意思。那这个附带状况指的是村庄的居民对于修复阶梯井的这个结果感到非常兴奋。不过同样在这一段最后面第4句的地方，我们看到 just as， 在这里的 as 则是介系词，表示 like 像，就像古代一样，现在这个阶梯井其实也是为了这些作品呢，为健康的生活还有社区的独立正在培养机会哦。以上是我们今天的内容，我是安娜，我们下次见。
That's all the time we have for today, everybody. I learned something about stepwells. They sound pretty cool. And hey, maybe that will encourage me to travel to India someday. I never really wanted to go there before, but, well, I like Indian food, so maybe going there for some Indian food and checking out these stepwells might be enough incentive for me to talk to my travel agent right away. And maybe you can too. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.